Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Tonight is Tuesday, January 8th, 2019. Tonight's topic, what to expect during a national emergency. Now, there's a possibility that President Trump may declare a national emergency during this evening's nationwide address, although he may not, and we're going to discuss the implications of him declaring a national emergency, whether he does it this evening or at some future date. And that would be over the construction of a border wall on the southern border of the United States. Before we get into that, let's take a look at the markets. First, let's start with the gold and silver markets. Now, the equity markets did rise today. Some decent movement in the equity markets, and gold actually went up a little bit. Gold went up $4.72, up about less than 0.5%. Still below $1,300, although it did get as high as $1,294 at some point during the day. It is currently at $1,284. That's up about just a little bit. So right now we're at $1,284. Okay, now silver. Let's take a look. Actually, that was the wrong chart. Let me show you the right chart. That was yesterday's chart. I was reading the right prices, but looking at the wrong chart. Here we go. Gold price today was down a little bit, down about $3.86 at about $12.85. It had gotten as high, or started earlier up in the day at $12.90, and right now is at $12.84. And silver, pretty much the same price action today. Also, not much movement. But it did, let's just pull it up here. It keeps pulling up the 7th. I don't know why. I want to get the 8th, which is today's price. There you go. Closed at $15.63, and that's where it is right now. So pretty much unchanged for silver. Both metals just hung on today, even though the equity markets pretty much had a very decent day. But let's take a look at the gold-silver ratio. Gold-silver ratio today is down a tidbit because silver did slightly better than gold, but it's still at 82.3 to 1. Now, in the equity markets today, we had a tweet earlier in the day from Trump saying that the deal with China is going along pretty well, and that was enough to boost the futures and then to move the stock market higher during the day. And the Dow Jones closed up 256 points. That was about 1.09% higher, and it closed at 23,787. Similar gains in NASDAQ, up 1.08% to 6897. That was a 73-point gain. And the S&P 500 rose almost 25 points to 2,574, and that was about a 1% gain. Over at the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin was pretty much flat over the last 24 hours at $39.91, down about 0.53%. Same for Bitcoin Cash, still hovering around $159, $160, pretty much flat. Ethereum down a bit, under $150 to $148.93, down 1.4%. Litecoin, a relative big winner on the day, to $39.13, $39.13, up 3.45%. And Ethereum Classic, which had a potential double spending issue the other day, had trading closed off for a while by Coinbase and is now under $5 at $4.97, down 0.08%. Okay, well, let's get into the topic of the evening, which is what will happen and what can you expect during a national emergency. Uh-oh, we got a moron here.
Presenting the distinguished international news commentator and foreign correspondent,
Smaulgld. This has been an extraordinary week in world affairs.
No, I told Hillary Clinton that that's moronic.
Okay, well, the topic that we're going to have over the next couple of weeks is going to be about this border wall. Now, if you remember, the government is partially shut down as a result of an impasse between President Donald Trump and the Congress over the funding for a border wall. Now keep in mind that the funding for a border wall was not included in the continuing resolution. So Congress has failed to pass a budget for years. They just keep extending these continuing resolutions. So that's a separate issue. The budget in and of itself, any of these spending plans only deal with a continuing resolution. And of course, if they do reach a deal, it'll be the same thing, continuing resolution to a certain date, and then they may or may not fund the wall. And right now we're at a point where it sounds like it's one of those situations where it's the irresistible force meets the unmovable object. Trump says he's going to get a wall, he wants a wall. Democrats say he's not getting one, and that's the end of the story. And as long as that impasse remains, then one could say that would last for a long time until someone finally gives. And one of the ways people might analyze that situation is who loses the most in a stalemate if the government remains closed. So let's look at the two sides and see how this might play out. However, we're going to see that it's not as simple as one side says, I'm going to get it, and the other side says you're not, because there are ways around that, and we're going to see that in a second. Now, Trump made a campaign promise that he was going to build a wall. He said it all the time, and he said Mexico was going to pay for it. Now, he might not be able to get that, but he probably will be able to get the wall, and we're going to explain why. He is running in 2020, and many commentators have said that if he does not have a wall in progress, that he will not get reelected, because that was one of his main campaign promises. The Democrats, on the other hand, did not run on not getting a wall built. I don't think anyone in Congress, certainly not Nancy Pelosi or Minority Senate Leader Chuck Schumer, said, we will make sure that we stop a wall. So they're, in some sense, they're in a lesser bargaining position there. What they did run on, many Democrats, was somehow to either extend DACA, and just let's go back on what DACA is and in the DREAM Act, is some type of comprehensive immigration reform that may help a certain large number of people who are undocumented or considered illegal aliens, whatever terminology you want to use, give them some type of amnesty or path to citizenship, but somehow clear that situation up. Now, both sides have always said if you're going to clear that situation up, one of the things you need to do is also have border security, because you don't want to have an ongoing issue. You want to make sure that everyone who comes in from this day forward is properly documented, and we know why they're here, what they're going to do here, and whether they're going to go home after a period of time and have a way of enforcing that, or whether they're going to stay, become naturalized, get a green card, whatever path that they get put on, whether they're going to receive some type of safe haven. Now, the Democrats clearly want, and some Republicans too, want some type of DACA extension or formalization of that. Now, Donald Trump earlier in the year, and what DACA was really not even a presidential executive order, but a presidential memoranda. And it essentially said that there was like a 2-year period where people who were children who came in with their parents and they came in illegally, that they would be allowed a 2-year period to apply to not get deported and apply for green cards. But it wasn't a full fix, and not only wasn't it a full fix, it wasn't really a law. It was a presidential memorandum, which Trump decided he wasn't going to continue. And then there was an injunction. The court said you can't do that. Then another court said it's probably constitutional for him to do that. Now that's going to go to the Supreme Court. And this, you have to keep this in mind, because this is one of the moving pieces. That'll go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will determine whether one president can undo another president's unilateral presidential memoranda. Now, I would think that the president's initial memoranda, President Obama's DACA order, was probably outside of the scope of his authority, since immigration would be subject to a congressional legislation, and because they didn't pass the DREAM Act, he passed this, or he executed this presidential memorandum, or issued this presidential memorandum that said that these people could stay, and that there's a 2-year period. And then Trump said, no, that we're not going to extend that period. And then one court said, well, he's not allowed to do that. That'll go to the Supreme Court, and most likely given the current makeup of the court, and also just considering that a president really shouldn't be issuing memoranda that create law. And even if that president did do that, the next president clearly should be able to undo that. And so what will probably happen is when that goes to the Supreme Court in the summer, they may either say that President Obama acted outside of his scope or that Trump is acting within his scope to undo that order. So that would take away from the Democrats a ability to use that as a bargaining chip, because that bargaining chip will be gone. Right now, they can try to ask for and get some type of legislation in exchange for a wall or some type of security. But they're actually not even really offering that right now. And it seems that the president, because they know the president will reject it because he believes that the Supreme Court will rule in his favor and he won't even have to negotiate that away. Now, remember, the Democrats did not run to stop a wall. They probably do run on creating some type of relief for a large number of people who are in the country illegally and whom they believe are contributing and they shouldn't be deported. And it seems Trump is, if he has his druthers, would want to deport them and stop more people from coming in. So their bargaining position is that. That's what, or not their bargaining position, but the reason for being in 2020 is to go back to the constituency and say, we got this, not that we blocked the wall. Now, Trump has to go back to his constituency in 2020 and say, I got a wall. And it seems either he has to create an emergency or one has to exist in order for him to do that. Why? Because unless the Democrats realize that their bargaining position, I believe, is eroded if they don't do a deal before the Supreme Court rules, that Trump will not only not deal with them and not give them anything on DACA or the DREAM Act or any type of comprehensive immigration reform that they might like. Remember, Trump wants to reduce the number of immigrants. He wants to reduce where they come from. He wants to eliminate the lottery system. So his plan on immigration reform is a lot different than theirs. So what he is going to do, and he may do it tonight, but I would probably think he shouldn't do it tonight. He will declare a national emergency and use the military to build a wall. Now, if he does that, that effectively takes away the irresistible force. The immovable object basically gets its way because they can't stop that. Now, what is a national emergency? Before we get to what a national emergency is, let's explain. We're going to go through the statute, but let's explain what Trump has been doing in order to create the concept and the buildup to the national emergency. And then we'll show what the law is. First of all, back in January, at the beginning of the year, he put out a video, Crisis at the Border. What's a national emergency? Obviously, a crisis. Now, remember what he's doing. And I think there's a lot of people that are missing the point here. They think that when Trump says he wants a wall, they criticize his wanting to have a wall on the basis that it's not going to stop illegal immigration. And I've seen all these silly memes where they show all the different other places where people can come into the country. They show, well, they can come in by plane, they can come in by boat, they can come in a lot of different ways. And that is all true. However, that's not what, and I think people are missing this point. It's a very big point. Trump is not saying the border wall is going to solve immigration issues like people overstaying their welcome. It's not going to solve the issue of people that are already in the country, obviously. It's not going to solve the issue of people who come in and claim asylum, people who come in, overstay their visa, people who come in and then leave for work. It's been very clear what he's doing, and I think that the Democrats are missing this point. He's making it very, very clear that this is going to be a national emergency. And I'll show you some of the things he's put out. It's hiding in plain sight, but people keep criticizing it as the border wall will be ineffective to stop illegal immigration, and that is not what he's talking about. Because if you come in through a port of entry, whether it is by airplane or whether it is by a port in the ocean, along the coasts, You have to get processed. There is somebody there to see who you are and what you're doing. Yes, they can come in and then disappear into the country and you never see them again. The wall isn't going to fix that. But what the wall will fix is what he is trying to point out is this is the national security part, the national emergency part is he's talking about people walking across the border and they could be dealing in drugs or they could be coming in to commit crimes that could be lucrative. If you have a criminal gang in the country, you can come in and commit your murder for hire. You can sell your drugs. You can do those things. Now, if you have to come in through a port of entry or fly in, well, there's a chance that there's an immigration officer. We know that, not just a chance. If you fly in from another country, whatever country in the world you come in, you will fly in and you will go through your screening as coming from a foreign country. And if you have with you drugs or potential criminal intent, they can do a background check. And again, it doesn't stop everything, and people still fly drugs in, but it's a lot harder to bring in tons of cocaine or whatever contraband you want to bring in on an airplane. It's a lot easier just to sneak it across the border if there's no one there to stop you. The same with criminals. Yes, you can declare yourself at customs and at the point of entry at passport control, but if you are a criminal and they can check on that, well, it's going to be a lot harder for you to come in the country if you have to go through a point. So the idea of the wall is to create a barrier for people not to come through, but to have to go to a point in the wall or a point somewhere to be processed. And it's very clear. I'm going to show you a few more examples, and this has all happened in the last couple of weeks, where Trump is playing this whole crisis at the border thing. So he's talking about, he's concerned about drugs coming in, criminals coming in, terrorists coming in, abuse of human rights in the caravans. Remember, you cannot bring a 20,000 person caravan on an airplane or even on boats. It's a lot easier if you could just walk across the border. And he's also talking about human trafficking. Now, this is where your national emergency comes in. The national emergency isn't we have too many people coming across the border and working in sandwich shops and picking lettuce. That's not the national emergency, and they're not documented and they're not paying their taxes. No, this issue is being framed as an issue of national security because of human trafficking, terrorists, drugs, criminals, and here you see criminal records, human trafficking. He's throwing these words out a lot. He's talking about the border wall as a national security issue, not as an immigration fix. It's not to stop undocumented workers from coming into the country. It's not to stop illegal immigrants and so on. It's to stop, in his mind, he's either a national emergency exists or he is ratcheting up the rhetoric to say that one exists. Now, that can be an issue as to whether actually one exists. However, it's in the president's prerogative to declare that national emergency. So he's laying the groundwork with these sets of tweets about border security and so on. So let's see. There's a few more here. I'll give you two more. Again, real border security. Uses the terms again. January 5th. Drug dealers, human traffickers, criminals. We keep seeing those terms. Border securities. And this is really, if I were a Democrat, I'd be looking at this and saying he's going to declare a national emergency, whether he does it tonight or in a few days, such that they're better off negotiating a deal, because if he declares a national emergency, they get nothing because he just does it, as they say in law, sua sponte, on his own. Again, more here. Border security, border security. This is not about immigration. And I think if you look at it in terms of immigration, you're barking up the wrong tree. You're looking in the wrong direction when Trump is saying, I'm going to get a wall. And he's saying he's going to get a wall for national security. And he's saying he's going to get a wall because he knows he has to get a wall to get reelected. And he's going to rely on the emergency, the national emergency. I think that's very clear. So it's not like one side says you're not going to get a wall and the other side says I'm going to get a wall, and they're just going to duke it out. Even in that case, if Trump didn't have the national security out, he would still have the upper hand, I believe, because his base wants the wall, whereas Pelosi and Schumer don't represent a real constituency. They're both, one's in the Senate, one's in the House. One represents California, the other represents New York, and not everyone in the Democratic Party walks lockstep. You got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you've got Manchin, you got people all over the spectrum in the Democratic Party. Some favor a wall, some favor some type of security. It's not the same as Trump saying, I want a wall, I have to have it, and the Democrats are all saying, we don't want no wall. I don't think they're not saying we don't want no stinking wall. I don't think that is the position. I think more Democrats want some type of deal on immigration. And if they don't deal now on immigration, either because Trump institutes a national security and builds the wall that way, or because they waited out too long and the Supreme Court says Trump can do what he wants because Obama wasn't supposed to do what he did, now there's no deal on DACA. Now let's get into, the Democrats could also be thinking, well, let him go ahead and try this national security thing, because we don't think there's a national security. We think what he's doing is he's just trying to get his campaign promise filled. No one needs this wall. There is no emergency. So we're going to challenge that that action when he declares there to be a national crisis. Well, let's take a look at the law on declaring a national emergency. This law was passed in, I think it was 1976, and it essentially allows the president to declare a period of national emergency, and the president is authorized to declare such national emergency, and then he has to transmit that act to the Congress. They publish in the Federal Register, and then they go about their merry way. You now have your national emergency. Now, the Congress can challenge the national security, and they can actually by resolution say, both houses can say we don't think this is a national security. However, in 1983, there was a court case that said they can do that, but in a sense, if Congress acts to deny a presidential national emergency act, that what they're effectively doing is passing legislation. Well, if it's legislation that they passed, if you know your civics, where does it go? It goes to the president, and the president ain't going to sign it. And it would require 2/3 votes to override his veto. So the chances of Congress getting together and saying that we don't think there's an emergency, we're going to pass a resolution saying it don't exist, it doesn't exist, no way, Jose, then Trump's just not going to sign it, and his emergency will be in place. The next thing they're going to do is say, okay, they might not even bother trying to say that there's not a national security, because if they don't get the votes, it's just not worth the trouble. The next thing they might want to do is challenge it in the court. Now here they've got some issues, because generally they're going to give deference to the president, the court is, especially a court which is now, most people would say, 5-4 in favor of Trump. And by the time this thing gets to the Supreme Court, it's possible that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who appears to be very ill, she hasn't missed a day of work in 25 years, and she's been out this week for 2 days, she may not be on the Supreme Court, and we may not even have another Supreme Court nominee approved by the time this gets to the Supreme Court, or there will be one. And really have to apologize. That happens almost once a night every time we have our live stream. I always get cut off once a night. What I've tried to do now is I try to stare at the screen, and if I see the mic start to go away, then I know to get back on pretty quickly. I think we caught that one pretty quickly. What I was saying, I believe before we got cut off, is that if the national emergency gets challenged in the courts and they try to say, look, there's no emergency here. The border crossings are at a low. We don't have that many people crossing as we had a few years ago, so how do you claim an emergency? And it's going to be a facts and circumstances case. However, they will always defer to the president. But the one thing that the president will have on his side is, again, this isn't about border crossing. This isn't about, we have a lot of, quote, illegal immigrants, undocumented workers crossing the border. He's going to argue we have a crisis not on immigration and not on all the issues surrounding people overstaying their visas. That might not be considered a national emergency. However, they would probably still defer to him, especially a court that's composed of 5-4 in his favor. But he's going to focus on human trafficking, human rights abuses in the caravans, terrorists coming in, drugs coming in, criminals coming in, and there he should be able to document certain amounts. And again, it's not like he has to prove his case. It's generally, it probably just has to pass some type of Smaulgld test that when the president declares a national emergency, that the courts are going to give deference to that president. And as I was saying, with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she may not be on the court in the summer, and nor may a Trump appointee be a replacement, because it may take some time to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg if she does indeed decide to retire. And that court case could come up about the executive action regarding the state of national emergency may come up before there is a replacement for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but in which case it just means that the Democrat side loses a vote in Ginsburg, and you just don't add the additional vote to make it 6-3. Now, what is all this going to do for the markets? I think this is relatively a non-event, because if it gets challenged and there's injunctions and the wall doesn't get built right away, it'll get built eventually. I don't see a circumstance where we're going to have a situation where there's an injunction and it lasts a long period of time and we don't get any construction going on the wall. Now, by the way, there's been national emergencies. We live under them right now. Generally, the way the national emergency situation goes is the president declares a national emergency. It can expire, or as we mentioned, the Congress can make it go away. But I think we're living under like 26 national emergencies, so you're not going to see much of a difference. Many of the national emergencies have to do with blocking, if you go through them, blocking property and prohibiting transactions with persons who threaten to commit or support terrorism. That was one after 9/11 that Bush put in, just scrolling down through like 25, 30 of these national emergencies. Many of them you don't even know about. Blocking property of persons undermining the sovereignty of Lebanon or its democratic processes and institutions. That was a national emergency declared August 2007. So these things, there are a lot of them. They're national emergencies. It sounds like, it's not the same as duck and cover national emergency, incoming nuclear weapon. So when a president declares a national emergency, he's really just looking to take some type of power on his own without consulting Congress. And that's exactly what would be happening here. Now, it would make sense, I think tonight what Trump is going to do is he is going to go on television and make the case that it is a national emergency. But my prediction is he's actually not going to declare it. He's going to try to win support for a national emergency. And I think if the Democrats are smart, they're not going to respond and say the wall isn't going to stop illegal immigration, because then they'd be missing the point, which they may be. I'm not sure they quite understand what they're up against, because he's only talking about, he has framed it in terms of stopping human rights abuses, terrorists, human trafficking, drugs, and criminals. If they say, well, they'll just go around it, that's not true. Because if you are going to bring drugs into the country, if you want to bring your criminal self into the country, you want to be a terrorist coming into the country, you want to drag along some people for human trafficking, you have to come into a port of entry. And that's different. You can't, if there's a wall that prevents you from just walking across the border as a terrorist, as a human trafficker, as a drug dealer, or as a criminal. And I think that's all this is about. All the other issues about immigration have nothing to do with this. I think what Trump is doing is he's ring fencing the issue. And then what he's doing is if they're still focused on immigration and DACA and Dreamers and the budget, they're going to lose each piece one by one, because the DACA thing will go away if the Supreme Court knocks it out. So now they don't have that leverage, and they're going to try to pass immigration reform, and he's going to veto it. And he's going to say, what do I get out of that? My base doesn't want that, and I got my wall, so there's really nothing you can do. And then they say, we're going to try to impeach you. Okay, impeach him for what? And then the whole other idea is that there has to be a budget. And so it's going to be very hard for Nancy Pelosi to put together budgets that have a chance of passing not just up to the Senate, but then getting both House signatures and then thrown to the president to sign, because most likely he's just going to veto whatever they throw his way, especially if everything they do is going to be an investigation into him. So I think the way to look at this is it's really piecemeal. What the wall is about is not comprehensive. It's not going to solve immigration issues. And Trump isn't arguing that it is. He's talking about it in terms of security. And that will be the basis on which he declares a national emergency, that the wall is required for national security because of a national emergency. But I think what he'd like to do tonight is make that case and then have the pressure on the Democrats to say, well, we agree. We have a national emergency, and we'll give you the money for the wall, which is no big give for them, because I don't think the Democrats lose anything to their supporters by giving $5 billion for a wall, provided they get something. And Trump may decide at this point, let him offer it, and then just say, oh, no, thank you. I'm just going to build the wall anyway under national security. So we'll see how it goes. Let's see what you guys think. But I don't think it'll have, just this alone is going to have any impact on the markets. I think you're going to pay more attention to China, what happens there, what happens with the Fed. Maybe tomorrow we'll talk about the Powell put and the Trump pump. But I think for now, this issue, and we'll see what he says tonight. And I should have asked the question whether you think that he'll declare a national emergency. Instead, I asked the question, and again, this is not scientific. I asked a poll. Here's the poll question. As an American, do you favor a wall, fence, or other sort of barrier along the southern border? And 87% out of 30 people said yes, 13% said no. Now, I don't think that the numbers nationally are that high. And I think it depends on, and I think this will be an important part of Trump's speech. If you ask the question, do you want a wall to prevent illegal immigration, more people might say no. They say, well, that doesn't really prevent illegal immigration. But if you say, do you want a wall to prevent drug smugglers, human traffickers, criminals, and terrorists from coming in, you might be more inclined to say yes. Because if you say it's just to keep out people from coming into the country, that opens you charges of racism, and you don't want people coming in, and you don't like people that are different than you. This is different. If you phrase it as it's not, you don't like people that are different than you, you don't want people that can come in and cause harm. And I think that is where Trump is going with this. It's not my insight, it's his own words. That's what he's tweeting, and I don't think people are picking up on that. Let's see what you guys think. All right, let's see. Hello, everyone, says Jeffrey. Now, remember, some people get confused if you're following live. When I finish the monologue, what I do is I go back to the comments, and I'm not looking at them in real time. You guys have been if we've been online now for 35 minutes, you guys have been talking amongst yourselves for 35 minutes in the chat. You may have been commenting on what I'm saying. So it may seem incongruous if I go back and I start reading the comments. So what I do is I go back, I read the comments, and then I try to answer any questions. I don't read them all. I try to pick out the ones that are either asking questions or making comments on what I might have said. All right, so Chrono Trigger fan. See, I'm not going to read stuff that is just, I have a tendency to read almost everything, and a lot of it's just stray comments that are read at, and they don't make any sense out of context. So I'll try to, there might be a pause while I'm not reading, because sometimes I just start reading stuff and I realize this is irrelevant, and I just read it anyway. Okay. So if I don't hit your comment, it's either because I don't think I can address it, or it's got nothing to do with what we talked about, and it would confuse people me to discuss what you wrote there. But if you do write about mugs, Smaulgld mugs, anything you write about mugs will be covered, because this channel essentially is a mug pumping channel. All this other analysis that we do is really pretty much irrelevant. And so if you want to talk about mugs, Smaulgld mugs, whatever type of mugs you want, then we are going to talk about that. Okay. And so Pablo Pina, here you go. I like to see the chart ratio of mug glass sales. Well, I can tell you right now, the mug sales of all kinds have outsold the glass. I think people don't appreciate Smaulgld glass yet. I think what's happened is we've oversold the mug concept, and people think that the glasses are cheap imitation, but they're not. No one has bought the Smaulgld mug shots. We have sold some of the Smaulgld glass, but we have not sold a lot of them. We basically are selling mugs hand over fist. I ship out Smaulgld Classics, Smaulgld, that's the Smaulgld Super Classic right there, Smaulgld Classic, Smaulgld Super Classic mugs just about every day. The Smaulgld store sends out the travel mugs, sends out the beer steins, sends out the espresso mugs all the time as well. Big sales across the board. Every now and then we get a glass sale. And again, we haven't promoted the glass that much. We're really promoting the mugs. But if you're interested in a Smaulgld mug, you've come to the right place. You just go to smaulgld.com. If you want the classic or super classic mugs, they are, this is the classic mug. The super classic is the red. You just go to smaulgld.com. You could pay with PayPal. If you want to pay with Bitcoin or Litecoin or Ethereum, you can tell me you're doing that. Send me the appropriate amount. And it goes out free shipping. It goes out free shipping in the continental United States. It goes out priority mail. You generally get it in 2 or 3 days. I had one shipment that took like 4 or 5 days. I have no idea why. But generally, it goes out right away. All the other mugs get shipped from the Smaulgld store. And I'll just leave you. There you go. Okay. What other comments have we this evening? Ace. If the wall was so important, why didn't they pass funding in the 2 years the GOP held the House and the Senate? I believe the answer to that is that they needed, they did pay, well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, Paul Ryan was not in favor of it, and that was obvious. In fact, they passed the last bill with no funding for the wall. I'm not sure whether the Republicans underestimated Trump's wish for it, or there were enough Republicans who wanted to thwart him and didn't want him to have it. I'm not sure. See, a lot of people, they look at this as Republican versus Democrat. It's not, because there are Democrats like Manchin who want the wall. There's Republicans who don't want the wall. There's never Trumpers. But I think what the issue in the Senate was that you needed a supermajority. It wasn't just 51 votes was going to get it approved, so you needed that to have more votes. At least that's my understanding of it. But I don't think it's important. The fact is it didn't get done, and Trump wants it. And he's playing the only game he can play to get it. He's either going to force a vote on it in exchange for something, or he's going to make his national security argument. And if he makes his national security argument, it really doesn't matter. All right, let's see. Reagan gave amnesty to 8 million illegals and got no border security. That's right. And he made a deal with, I believe it was Ted Kennedy, to give amnesty a lot to Irish Americans. All right. Ace, there's already 700 million miles of wall in highly populated areas. That's right. In fact, I saw a thing today, Ace. I think Trump wants another 1,000 miles of wall, and there's 700 miles of wall, and that's where any of the wall funding has gone. They have gone to fix those walls. Now, one could argue that, yes, obviously, if it's in a populated area, that's where most people are going to go through, and you already have border checkpoints there. If there's, where there's a wall, there's got to be somewhere around the wall where there's a checkpoint. But the issue really is during in that 1,000-mile strip, that is where you can pass undetected. And again, if your only reason, remember, if you're coming in to be an immigrant, that's one thing. If you're coming in to be a criminal, to do human trafficking, to do to transport drugs, or to be a terrorist, that's where you're going to come in. You're going to come where no people are. I mean, that makes sense. And that's why the issue is one of national security and not immigration. Because if you're coming in to get a job, you could sneak in, I'm sure. But you're better off coming in at a port of entry, because then you don't risk deportation, because you come in, you say, I'm here, and whatever. If I don't know exactly, you have to. Every person has a different reason for coming into the country. But every person who tries to come into the country that comes in where they actually have to meet a border control person can state their purpose while they're there. They could say they're on a temporary visa. Then you've got other issues, whether you can track down people on temporary visas, overstaying them. But if you don't introduce yourself to border control, and the best place not to do that is over that 1,000-mile strip. That's what the argument is. It's not that a wall is going to stop illegal immigration or people overstaying their visas. It's designed to make it more difficult, not even to stop fully, criminals, human traffickers, drug smugglers, and terrorists from coming in. Stacking assets. I think they should just stack up some mugs to let people know we mean business. Yes, remember, mugs can be used as an offensive or defensive weapons. Open carry at the border, that's a bad thing. A wall of mugs is stacking assets. Yep, sandbags and mugs on top. Smaulgld mugs. Sean Saylor. Bush did the same. This was all supposed to be the latest high-tech sensors. They completed the project, spent however much. The day it was set to go online, DH announced we're not going to use it. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Max says Smaulgld mugs are too precious for the wall. That's true. Joe Lazaro. Haven't seen you in a while. Hi, Joe. Right, I remember hearing years ago about a virtual fence. Doesn't look like it works. A lot of people are saying, oh, we should just use technology. Well, I've seen a lot of technology capture a lot of crimes on camera. You always see these pictures, they put them on YouTube. Someone gets raped or someone gets beat up or killed, and it's all there on the technology, but it didn't stop the crime. 7 times more potential terror attacks were thwarted at the Canadian border than the Mexican border. We need a northern border. Yeah, well, one doesn't negate the other. It's not like they're mutually exclusive. If you're going to argue for border security, you have to determine, do you want a border security? And again, let's step back. First, you have to, and they've all said this, if you're going to determine border security, first you have to determine whether you need border security. Then you have to determine what is the best way. Is a wall the best way to have border security? Obviously, you can argue there are other ways to secure the border. The question is not whether a wall in and of itself stops all security threats. It's whether it aids in any way. And you could say, well, it's not that effective. But one question you can ask is, well, for $5 billion, is it really a big waste of money, given that in the grand scheme of things, $5 billion isn't that much money? I mean, if it stopped small numbers of criminals from coming in, then it would pay for itself. But the issue is, as some people have pointed out, do you really want a country that has walls around it? Because the reverse is true. Maybe they won't let you get out. So I don't think they've spent enough time really I think it's all political bickering and bipartisan, or not bipartisan, partisan bickering. But no one's really thought about, or if they have, they're not discussing it. Is a wall a viable means of providing security from bad actors? Not from providing, stopping illegal immigration or from people overstaying their visas or solving your immigration issues, but whether it actually can thwart some criminals, some drug dealers, some terrorists, some human traffickers. I would say it might. Now, then the question is it worth the money? And does the border wall provide other downsides? Environmental issues? Does it provide aesthetic issues? Does it provide there's a lot of issues in the wall, and I think you have to I think they're not discussing the issue of the wall. They're just saying you're not getting it, and the other one's saying I'm getting it, and they're not. But I think Trump is making a stronger argument for the wall than they're making it against the wall, because I don't think they're arguing against his reasons for wanting the wall, which is border security, not for immigration reform. All right, let's see. DW, the wall will not stop everyone, but it would help. Well, that's kind of where my view of this is. All right, let's see. Max, you have to rewrite your comment because you have, looks like YouTube has scrubbed it, so it's not showing up. Ace. The Chinese and the Russians, this is Ace 1, have actually hacked into the control panels of some of our power plants. Why doesn't anybody talk about that? Well, that's a whataboutism. I mean, well, actually, I don't know if that's true. I know there was a story a while back. They said the Russians had hacked into it. It was in the New York Times or the Washington Post. Then it turned out not to be true. But that is a security issue, that's for sure. And you can't stop that with a wall. Sean Saylor, I have been screaming national emergency about this since 1990. Back when Pat Buchanan was screaming about national emergency about it down at the border with a bullhorn running for president. Pat would have been a good president. Well, Pat was, in a very similar way, was Trump with ideology. He was a, what do you call that? America. He was actually America first type of person. And same with Ross Perot. They were both against NAFTA, globalism, and all that kind of stuff. Pablo Pino, if all of a sudden a mass group of Americans started marching to Canada, Canada leaders would go bananas. That's right. All right. Max Strong says the Pentagon, CIA, and FBI, your best interest of that $21 trillion was well spent. Now, the thing about that $21 trillion, I've never investigated that personally. Sean says that's right, Ace. What about the missing $21 trillion? I'm not sure it's a missing $21 trillion. I think the accounting is so sloppy. I'm not sure that that money is missing, but I think that story is half baked and half true, but I don't know enough about it. But it sounds like one of those stories where it's designed to be on the alternative media, and it's designed to be a big scandal, and the money's gone, and then of course if you can't find it, it's gone into aliens and all kinds of other stuff. All right, let's see. Pablo Pino, will CNN show Trump they've been banning him lately? All right. Stacking assets. Do you guys think we could make a wall out of Mountain House Pasta Primavera jugs? You could, and you can solve whatever hunger problems you have at the border. Let's see. Ann Holloman just throws out a buy Bitcoin. I wonder why. Philip Kennedy. He will declare RBG incapacitated and announce ACB as his nominee. He's talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Amy Coney Barrett, I believe is her name. You know, I mentioned the other night, I don't think people fully appreciated the idea, if you really wanted to be, I don't know if it's Machiavellian or at least foresighted, is right now the Democrats have, and I know Justice Roberts says there are no Democrat and Republican judges, that's nonsense, is you've got Breyer and Ginsburg, both pretty much over 80 years old, and I think the oldest Republican justice is Clarence Thomas. and I was suggesting that Clarence Thomas resign when Ruth Bader Ginsburg resigns. People are saying, well, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to lose that seat? Well, you wouldn't lose that seat. You would replace Clarence Thomas with a younger justice, especially if you wanted that for insurance if Trump doesn't win in 2020. So if Ginsburg and Thomas resign at the same time, Trump gets 2 picks, and then he puts on 2 younger, quote, conservatives or Republican judges, and now you have a 6-3 majority for a much longer time. A lot of people were saying the mistake that Ginsburg made, if she was such an ideologue and she wanted to make sure that her position prevailed on the court rather than trying to outlive the Trump administration, which she probably didn't expect to happen. She probably should have resigned when she was 82 years old, when Obama was in, giving him a pick well before he had he could have put forth Merrick Garland earlier, and he would have gotten approved. But it was because McConnell wouldn't approve a vote on that in Obama's last year that they were denied Merrick Garland. Now, Jorge Durte says, no sense in having a country if we have no wall. Now, that's a very hardline position because we've had a country, and many countries have had countries without walls. But again, there are strong feelings on this on both sides. I would argue, just from what I see, more people are in favor of a wall than against it. I think the people that are against the wall are more for other things than they are against the wall. And I think the people that are for a wall, it's like, I'm for a wall, period. And that's it. They think that the wall is the be-all and the end-wall. All right, let's see. What do you think of Bolton overriding Trump's Syria decision? Well, it remains to be seen. It seems like Bolton was dissed by Erdogan today. I have to catch up on what's going on, their full name. But clearly, there are people that are neocons that would want the United States to be in every single country. Sean said, I think the Dems will obstruct over the wall no matter what because Trump wants it. Well, that's for sure. I mean, they've already said you're not getting a wall. And again, Trump says, I'm getting it, but I think Trump has the ability to execute on his threats more than the Democrats have. They have to fight him. Remember, anytime you're fighting Trump, you can't spread yourself thin. Do you want to be fighting him on all fronts? Just like in any war, you don't. You want to fight him on the wall. You want to fight him for Russia. You want to fight him for impeachment. You want to fight him on every last thing. You have to pick your battles because you have to define yourself by your battles. And then remember, you're going to have probably 15 or 20 Democrats running for president. And they're going to have to define themselves by what battle they picked. So in a way, Trump's at a disadvantage, that is everybody attacking him, but no one has really stepped up to be the defining issue that is against him, other than a lot of people are against him for a lot of things. But that's going to make it hard to run against them because you're going to have Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, maybe Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker. I mean, the list is huge of people that want to run for president. And Nancy Pelosi's not going to run for president. Chuck Schumer's not going to run for president. So they're going to be the ones who can define themselves against Trump, but they're not. They're just in leadership positions. And then they're going to get the left-wing guard going against them. So it's going to be an interesting thing. I think Trump is in a much stronger position than many people realize, even though he's under full-scale attack. TSA agency follows citizens' homes, shut it down, keep it down. American Supertramp. Build a wall to keep illegal mugs out of America. Absolutely. Only Smaulgld, classic, and super classic mugs, as you see on your screen, they are real wealth. All right, let's see. Alice Coopers. I haven't seen you in a while, Alice. Good to see you. The cabal forgot they voted for a wall with Obama, Bush, and they supported the Israeli wall. It's unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, you have clips of Chuck Schumer, all the Democrats saying, Bill Clinton, Obama, they're not explicitly saying we need a wall, but very, very strong talk on money for the border security. I think if the Democrats were smart, what they would do, and they'd have to make it look like they weren't just trying to thwart Trump, they'd put together $8 billion for border security and nothing for the wall. And then they can bicker over. Then you would get a real debate over what's the best way to spend $5 to $10 billion on border security. They can argue whatever they want. They could say we can have more people, that whatever the border security is. But what they're effectively put themselves in a position is no wall and no border security. That you don't want to argue that position as a Democrat. You don't want to be seen as, well, we don't want to have a wall because Trump wants it. Well, what are you doing for border security? Nothing, because Trump wanted it, so we're not going to have it. That's not going to fly. They have to have some, or you can say, now there's another argument, we don't want border security because we want open borders. Now, I don't think the majority of the country wants that, but you can make an argument that the world would be a better place if we don't have borders and all that. But they have to state that. Right now, their only position is we don't want a wall because Trump wants it. And they're not answering the fundamental question, do they want border security or not? If they want border security and it's not on a wall, how do they want it? Or they don't want border security. Buy mugs, says Pablo Pina, yes. Yeah, I'm going to take this one. What every man should have. Palladium is going nuts. Outpaced Dow, NASDAQ, S&P, and gold. Palladium is real money. Palladium is worth more now than gold. It's like at 1324 last I checked. What is it now? 1312, but gold is 1284. So it is still ahead. Let's see. All right, I think that's about it. Maybe we can finish tonight in advance of an hour. That would be good. Some people freak out when they see that 1.0 on the YouTube, and then they just don't click on it because it's too long. I know a lot of the regular listeners here, the Smaulgld game changers, like the longer style, get a chance to interact YouTubes, but some people like short and sweet, so can't please everyone. Get what you pay for. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you tomorrow. And don't forget, Smaulgld mugs are game changers. I'll leave you the link. Stop off. Go to the website and hook yourself up.